Hello there, and welcome to College Football Now, our weekly show. I'm Bram Parsons with our national college sports writer, Matt Murschel, and we do picks, and we take Twitter questions, and we're on Facebook Live on the Orlando Sentinel sports page. Usually we start with picks and get to Twitter. We're going to start with Twitter because there's breaking news, and it involves not just the college football world, but the Orlando football world, but we'll make this interactive. We'll start with the tweets.
Okay.
So the first tweet we got, and this guy was right on it, is from Justin Kane. And when we get it up, are we getting the tweets up?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm working. You're having some audio issues that I'm trying to
It's all right.
juggle through at the same
Live
time.
TV.
Exactly.
We're doing it live.
We're doing it live.
There we go.
There.
Justin Kane asked us who's going to host the ACC championship now, and you're thinking, wait, what are you talking about? And then, of course, the other tweet that we're going to bring up from our colleague Scott Maxwell, who also is on the same theme here. Where do you think the ACC championship might go this year? Maybe a place very, very nearby that starts and ends with O. And, of course, what they're talking about is news that came out in the last 2 hours. The ACC has voted to relocate all of their championships that were going to be held in the state of North Carolina during the 2016-2017 calendar HB2. Of course, the bill there has gotten all sorts of attention. The NCAA has pulled out events. The NBA has pulled the All-Star Game. This was expected. The ACC makes the announcement today. And it's news in the college football world because this is in all the sports that they're doing. But it's news for Orlando because we've got a stadium here. And perhaps this could be a place that the ACC brings its football title game this year.
Yeah, you talked about why this is big news. Well, because, again, with the ACC and you talk about economic impact that you can have, with a game like this, it makes it a big deal. So, you're talking about a place like Orlando, which obviously has its stadium. We're talking about the fact that, it's recently renovated the last couple of years. The stadium's already hosted an ACC game earlier this year, so to speak, with Florida State and Ole Miss going at it, back in the first week of the season. So you would think this would make perfect sense that Orlando would be a great spot maybe to go out and get the game. Central Florida Sports Commission, which is the group that works to get sporting events in the community here in Central Florida, is working and said already this afternoon that they are interested in going after pursuing these games, all of the championships really, to try to bring them here, including the football one, bring them here to Orlando. So Orlando seems to be a place that would make sense. I think there's a couple other spots maybe in the state of Florida. You could look at Jacksonville, which has hosted the ACC football championship back in the early 2000s. You look at maybe Tampa, but Tampa seems to be kind of pulling away with the idea that thanks to the fact that they host the national championship this year, they have got one of the bowl games as well. They're not maybe as interested in pursuing it. You also have a site like Miami. Miami could be interested in doing it. They just opened up just spent a ton of money to renovate their stadium as well. They wouldn't have any sort of conflict with the Miami Dolphins, who are off that week. The biggest issue, I think, for Orlando really is going to be whether or not there's going to be any sort of conflict during that weekend. And as we were looking at the dates, which are December 3rd for the ACC Championship, that falls right in the middle of the FHSAA football championships, the high school championships. So it'll be interesting to see what's the city going to do, if they're going to try to work around that. Will there be a workaround around that? Either way, it definitely could be good news for Orlando.
Well, I mean, if Orlando's going to host it, there has to be a workaround.
Yeah, there has to be a workaround.
The first weekend of the high school football championships take place at Camping World Stadium that weekend. 2 games on Friday, 2 games on Saturday. They play at 1 o'clock. They play at 7 o'clock. It's the Class 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A weekend. Of course, the next weekend is the 5A through 8A. So it's the smaller schools, but it's their state title game. Orlando has worked hard to bring the state title game to Orlando, to keep it in Orlando. Now this is on the horizon. Central Florida Sports Commission, they're going to need to figure out an answer to this. And there are options out there.
Yeah.
And
And I'll explain why, because according to last year's figures this is from the city of Charlotte, that game brought in over $30 million of economic impact for the community. So if you look at that, that's a big deal if you think about it. I know it could possibly only be a one-time thing, but just to have that $30 million impact, maybe even more, to the city of Orlando for that weekend, that's a hefty amount of money that the city would have to look at. Not to mention, like you talked about, that's hotels, that's restaurants, that's for one weekend. So if you also hosted the same weekend of the high school, if wherever, if the high school finals were to be here or wherever they're going to be, I mean that's a large economic impact for the community. So whoever goes after it, whether it's Orlando, whether it's Miami, whether it's Tampa, whether it's a place I've seen mentioned, FedEx Field up in Washington, where maybe they would do that, where the Washington Redskins are, maybe they would go there as well. I don't know because of the controversy surrounding the Washington Redskins name, if you want to take a game and put it there as well, but there aren't going to be that many options on the East Coast, to be honest with you, when you're looking at the size of the magnitude of this game and how many fans you want to have at it.
And you're talking 3 months to do this, and
that seems like a lifetime, but it isn't
not
really in this business, because you have to get everything together. You have to work with your tourism bureaus. You have to make sure that there are hotels available. You got to make sure who's going to be able to handle the flood of fans that could come in. You also got to worry about traffic. Let's be honest. Orlando with the I-4 construction on I-4 going on, I think that's got to be a concern as well. Because again, you don't know where they're going to be at that time of year, and it's a busy time of year for Orlando too. Because let's not forget, they host 3 bowl games in that stadium. You've also got the Cure Bowl, the Russell Athletic, and the Buffalo Wild Wings Citrus Bowl. So busy time for that stadium. But I could see, if you're very interested and you want to do something, you got to figure out a way how to make that kind of work.
News came out at 1:30. At 3 o'clock, Central Florida Sports Commission had already officially sent out a release saying they're going after it.
Yeah.
You and I have spent the last 2 hours looking up schedules, and are the Dolphins playing, or the Jaguars playing, and where are the stadiums that are even having an opening, and you're calling people. They didn't waste any time. They're very serious about this. So, yeah, they've got bowl games to host. Yeah, they've got high school football.
Well,
but they're going to figure out. It's not just football. They're going after all of them.
They're going after a lot of things. They're going after golf. They're going after tennis. They're going. But football obviously is the
prime one in this is the football.
Yes.
It's the one that has the $30+ million impact, $16.7 million direct spending impact from last year's title game. We'll be on this. Follow all the coverage at OrlandoSentinel.com for updates along the way. This is a story that is still fresh and still breaking, and it should continue to have a Central Florida feel to it until the ACC determines where they will go.
Yeah, the ACC hasn't speculated when they'll make a decision. I'm sure there'll be some sort of bidding process. I'm sure there's been, the cities have been contacted by the ACC, or they're reached out to the ACC. Very much similar to what the Big 12 is doing with expansion. I'm sure you get everyone kind of coming out to you and asking, we're interested in doing this. What is it? Can we handle it? What is it going to take to do that as well? And let's not forget the Central Sports Commission. When the NCAA announced that they were pulling their events out of relocating their events out of North Carolina, they also announced that they were kind of go after a lot of those as well. So a fun, interesting time for Central Florida, where you could see a lot of these events come in, and we could see a lot of sporting activity, really college sporting activity in the next couple months.
And personally, I got to say, not too many times I can look at a sports organization and say, well done.
Yes.
But well done NCAA, well done ACC.
Hopefully that'll happen. And let's not forget too, not to continue to push this, but they also were able to get the NCAA tournament games, which will be back at the Amway coming up in March. So what we already thought was going to be a busy blockbuster year here in the state of Florida could actually get bigger with some of the news that's come out in the last couple days.
We're back to the show part now. They're going to play football on the field this weekend, and they did last weekend. Matt and I made our picks. I'm giving him credit for Pitt, even though you made the Pitt pick before the show. You made the Penn State pick on the show, but the graphic said Pitt. I'm going to give it to you. We were both 7-1 last week. 18-4, I lead. You're 16-6 on the season. We've got a handful of games this weekend. Last weekend, we bemoaned the lack of top 25 games going against the marquee games. There are a few games that were certainly excited. This weekend, now back to some high-end games. And
I would argue, I think week 2 was almost as exciting in some ways as week 1. I mean,
there were a handful
of games that were great, but I mean, I think when you look at what happened with the excitement with Oklahoma State, with some of the other things going on, I think week 2 actually topped what I think most of our expectations were going to be. We thought week 2 was just going to be a snooze, and it turned out to be actually pretty exciting. Right. This week will be interesting. 3 of the top 4 teams in the AP poll will actually be on the road against other ranked teams. First time that's happened in AP poll.
The top 3 teams on the latest AP poll. And our first game that we are predicting, number 2, Florida State, heading to number 10, Louisville. 12 p.m. kickoff on ABC. ESPN has chosen this for their game day site. ESPN Game Day, first visit ever to Louisville, which was news to me. Of course, Florida State coming in fresh off an easy win over Charleston Southern on Saturday. They're 2-0, also with their win in Orlando over Ole Miss. Louisville comes in. Sophomore quarterback Lamar Jackson, watching it, 175 yards rushing in a game. Set the ACC record for total offense, 610 yards. This is a big game. This is an ACC opener. This is a big game to open the season for both of these two teams. Could really change the complexion nationally when we talk about college football.
Oh, for sure. You talk about the ACC having Florida State and Clemson in the mix, in the top 4 or 5 teams when you're talking about the college football playoff. Let's look at the fact how Louisville now has found their way in the top 10. If they somehow were to upset Florida State, you got that maybe the burst up there as well. So that's 3 ACC teams in the top 10. And then you talk about what an attractive game this is for television. You got Florida State with DeAndre Francois, up-and-coming freshman quarterback. You got Lamar Jackson, a sophomore who's done an amazing job so far this season. Had probably the first Heisman highlight we saw last week when he leaped over a defender, to get into the end zone. A guy who's really doing a spectacular job so far. These two teams going at it. Dalvin Cook, who seems to be overshadowed the last 2 or 3 games, if you think about it so far this season, hasn't had the kind of start I think people thought he has. This is a game that's going to be filled with a lot of interesting storylines. I look at Louisville, how, yes, they've looked impressive. They put up lots of points, lots of blowouts in their wins, but have been sloppy at times. Even in the Syracuse blowout, they were very sloppy. Had wide open passes, receivers were dropping them. They had too many penalties at times. They didn't look anywhere near crisp and clean as you would think they would need to be. That's going to be a key for them. Because when you talk about going against a Florida State team, Florida State's one of the top teams in the ACC when it comes to turnover margin. They're going to force you to make mistakes. And I think that's something that will be interesting to see. That's why I picked Florida State to win this game, because I feel like, again, they have an opportunity to make Louisville kind of go have those mistakes, to make Lamar Jackson push himself a little bit, maybe do some things he doesn't want to do. Yes, his 7 touchdown passes have been averaging 23 yards per play, but if you take away that deep ball, if you take away those opportunities and you make them kind of have to grind it out, I think that falls into Florida State's hands. It falls into the play of DeAndre Francois, Dalvin Cook, and what Jimbo Fisher wants to do, especially with the defense. It's going to be lacking a little bit now that Derwin James is out.
And I'm going to make my official pick. I'm taking Florida State too. I picked Florida State to win them all on the way to the college football playoff. And I see a lot of the things that you're looking at. And Lamar Jackson's played great, but he hasn't played against a team like Florida State. No. You can't make mistakes against Florida State and get away with it. You can do that against a Syracuse. Might make you a little uncomfortable for a few minutes. You can't do that against Florida State no matter who's out there playing. And DeAndre Francois, this is going to be his chance, another chance to broaden his national reputation. It's another national televised game on ABC, a noon game. I'm taking Florida State to win this one rather comfortably for a top 10 game. I'm not saying they're going to blow them out, but I think by the fourth quarter, this game will have settled itself out, and Florida State will be on its way to 3-0.
Yeah, what I'm looking forward to is I know this sounds odd, but I'm looking for the nerves that Louisville and some of their players may be getting in this game, because you got to imagine, you come in, now all of a sudden you're ranked top 10. You've got ESPN Game Day there. You've got lots of attention on this matchup. Lamar Jackson getting a lot of Heisman hype already as well. This is the first time that Papa John's Stadium has hosted a matchup between 2 top 10 teams since I think 2004, almost a decade ago. So there's going to be a hyped up crowd to begin with. We'll see if this team can kind of get itself, really kind of focus itself out going in that game against Florida State. That's why I like Florida State again, because I think Florida State has been through these big games. They did it against Ole Miss on Monday night and Labor Day. I think they do it again against Louisville.
And I'm interested much. I want to see how Kirk Herbstreit handles this, because he's the color guy for the game, and when will he leave the game day studio and get into the stadium? Because he's not doing the primetime game. He's doing the 12 o'clock game, so that'll be something to watch. We are live on Facebook Live now. If you have any questions, you can ask anytime during the show. We will answer them, and we will continue with our picks now. Maryland comes back to Florida for the second straight weekend to take on UCF on Saturday night, a 7 p.m. start on CBS SN. Maryland football team, they've scored 93 points in their first 2 games. It is the most points in program history for the first 2 games since 1927. Second most in Terrapin history. And Perry Hills is a big reason for that. He's 9th in the FBS in completion percentage through 2 games. He's the top guy in the Big Ten. 75% completion percentage in their first 2 games. UCF comes back licking maybe a few wounds from the Michigan game. It's certainly some highlights that still took place in Ann Arbor. I'm picking UCF to win this game, but I have a note here for record purposes. It's contingent on Justin Holman being able to play. We do not know at this point if Justin Holman will be able to play. He left the game against Michigan. He's on pace to possibly play on Saturday, but I think if he plays, I've seen enough from this UCF team to think that they're going to give a team fits, that a Power 5 team or Houston, it's going to be this game. UCF is going to beat Maryland on Saturday if Justin Holman starts.
I got Maryland in this game, and it's nothing against UCF. I think UCF defense has done an amazing job. We saw what they did last week with their rushing attack against Michigan. You know, Michigan defense, was supposed to be one of the best defenses going in. You know, I think they continue to struggle a little bit on the passing game. They need to fix the special team problems. That was just too much. They got a little bit overwhelmed. I think this game is going to be close. But I think what it is, you know, Maryland now uses that kind of spread offense, more of an up-tempo type offense, similar to what UCF is doing a little bit. Talked to DJ Durkin, the Maryland coach, earlier this week, and he said, listen, we run this kind of offense, so we're going to be prepared for it. There's nothing they can do that we can really, you know, we won't be ready for. So I think that's going to help them out as well. I think if UCF wants to beat Maryland, I think they're going to have some big plays. I think they're going to have to get to Perry Hills. And I think what they're going to have to do is make sure that, you know, he doesn't get out of the pocket and make things happen as well. So I like Maryland, but I think Maryland wins this game in a close one. And I think, again, this is an opportunity for UCF to have a good showing against a Big Ten team. These are all foundation blocks for this program as they continue to build up under Scott Frost. You need to do that. We saw what UCF did on television against, you know, Michigan. They had over 2.8 million people watch that game. Now, a lot of those were probably watching Michigan, but still, to have your brand and your team and your players out there on national television, all those things will help out in the long run. The same thing will happen against Maryland.
And we learned against Michigan, UCF is already faster. And there's already a lot more speed on this team.
Yes.
They're fun to watch already, and I think this will be that first statement win in the new era there. You've been in Gainesville the last 2 weekends. You will actually be at UCF on Saturday, but you've seen the Gators up close. The next game we are talking about is the Florida Gators hosting North Texas. Florida into the top 25 at number 23 this week. They host them at 7:30. It's going to be on ESPNU. The Gators have allowed only 14 points in their first 2 games this season. They've held opponents to under 200 yards, and they found some offense against Kentucky in a remarkable, beautiful way for if you're a Gator fan, winning that one 45-7. I'm taking the Gators. There's no way either of us are taking North Texas to beat Florida. But my question to you is, we had questions about the Gators coming into the season. You've seen them twice against teams that they should beat. But how real is now this thought that you're starting to, this belief from Gator Nation that not only are they going to be SEC East contenders, but maybe they should be talked about for the SEC title, maybe possibly talked about for a playoff? Is that getting the horse a little too far ahead of the...
Let's pump the brakes on the discussion, first of all, of SEC championship. Let's pump the brakes on, playoff spot. I mean, I think it was impressive. I think they looked better. The thing I think any coach will tell you is they want to see their team improve from week to week, and I think we saw that with Florida. We saw offensively they made some corrections on their line. They were able to protect Luke Del Rio. They were able to buy him some time. I think we saw that. He was able to we saw a 75-yard touchdown pass in that game. We hadn't seen something like that from Florida but once all last season. So to be able to see the offense maybe kind of really start to get its feet solidly on the ground. You look at the rushing attack. They've now got this kind of triple-headed monster on the rush in the ground game. They're able to take advantage of that. And then, as we've talked about year in and year out, this defense is always going to be solid, and they were solid the last 2 weeks. They've held a team to under 200 yards, second straight week. The last time that's happened was in 2009 under Urban Meyer. So, I mean, again, this is a team defensively that looks good. Having Jalen Tabor back from a suspension was huge. I think that will continue to help them out. They'll get the win, as we mentioned, easily for sure this week. They just got to keep everyone healthy, and they got to keep showing that they can make that move forward. I think it's like baby steps, because once you get that Tennessee game is always in the future looming, and that's the game really that will kind of determine whether or not this team is a factor in the SEC East.
Yeah, I mean, it's good wins. It's UMass and Kentucky.
And Kentucky's bad.
And Kentucky's really
Kentucky's really bad. And I know it's an SEC team.
They're terrible.
But they're terrible. And they only had 100 yards midway through the fourth quarter. So this defense did an amazing job. But let's pump the brakes on the idea that this is going to be a college football or a playoff team. I want to see how they do every week in and week out until they get past Kentucky and then they get to Georgia. That's when we're going to start seeing how good this team really is.
10 yards passing Kentucky had until that garbage drive at the end. It gave them 55 for the game.
Horrible. I mean, talk about making a drink. I mean, that was the game that would do that for you. So.
One other state game we're going to talk about, number 25, Miami heads up to the mountains to take on Appalachian State, noon kickoff on ESPN. And we've talked about the Gators having a strong start to the season. Talk about Miami and FAU, but they scored a school record 108 points in their first two games. They're out-rushing their opponents 652 to 69. This is a new coach breathing new life. They've found guys that can run the ball, and Walton and Yearby and Kaya has looked impressive. This is a road game. Appalachian State, we saw what they're capable of doing. They put a scare into Tennessee on opening night back almost 2 weeks ago. But this will be a minor test for Miami. You pick Miami to win. I'm picking the Hurricanes to win. But this will be their first test to kind of get a look at just how good this Miami team is. They've done what they're supposed to do in their first two games. Can they do what they're supposed to do in this one on the road? I'm taking the Hurricanes, but I'm intrigued to watch this one to see how they perform.
Yeah, I am too. I would say this. I think what helps Miami in this game is the fact that they were able to see what Appalachian State did to Tennessee, that first weekend. Tennessee got the scare. So Miami knows they can't look lightly past this team. And I think we know that Appalachian State won 11 games last year. This is a very good team. You talked about the rushing defense. They're holding teams to less than 1 yard per carry on the ground. That's an amazing stat if you think about it. They're going to face a guy in Marcus Cox who leads the Sun Belt in rushing, a guy who can really kind of get out in space and make things happen. They've got to contain him like they've done with the other running backs. And you look at what they've done. That rushing attack for Miami has really helped them. And I think that helped Brad Kaya as well. He doesn't feel like he has to take the onus of their offense on his shoulders and carry it forward. I think now he can take that and use the situation and move, and rely on these running backs. There's a stable of 3 running backs that can help out and do them. So I think Kaya is actually going to get better. I know he threw a couple of picks the last game. I expect to see him better. I don't think they're going to take this game lightly, but I see Miami winning the game.
And before we move on across country, if you have any questions, you can ask them on Facebook Live. We'll also have Twitter questions later. An old colleague of ours, Lonnie, is watching. So hello to Lonnie.
Oh,
and
hello, Lonnie.
We're being watched in Norway right now.
We're being watched in Norway?
There are people in Norway watching us talk about American college football.
I feel honored.
I can't help you guys with the tip of the league, but we'll at least concentrate on American college football. Houston takes on Cincinnati on Thursday night. Number 6 Houston goes on the road. They showed their muscle last week against Lamar, holding them to just 73 yards. But we've talked about Houston. They got their opening win against Oklahoma, which was a huge win for the Cougars. And if they're going to remain in the discussion for a playoff, they're only going to have a few select times to really make an impact. This is going to be one of them. Cincinnati, one of the better American teams, certainly one of the teams in American that could beat a Houston team, certainly on paper. This is Thursday night. It's national TV and ESPN. I'm taking Houston in this one. But this is a game they need to do more than win. Houston needs to look impressive in doing so. Yes. And even if Cincinnati plays, Houston needs to look like the better team and look like one of the best teams in the country, like they did against Oklahoma, so they can continue to be in that discussion as the season goes on.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, this game being on ESPN on a Thursday night, really this is their time to showcase. There aren't going to be that many games on. I think that's it, right?
There's 3 games.
3 games on Thursday. So really, this is your opportunity to showcase yourself in your program, especially when you get these chances. You have to look good. And he mentioned, Greg Ward Jr. comes back at quarterback. He missed last game. He was banged up a little bit. This gives him an opportunity maybe to get on the field and kind of do some good things. He obviously is one of the big keys for this team to find success, to continue on and get to the college football playoff if possible. I think their defense has done an amazing job under Tom Herman. They're a very attacking defense. They also take advantage of opportunities. They get lots of turnovers, and they get down in the opponent's part of the field, and they're able to turn those into points. That's something they got to do against Cincinnati. Cincinnati hasn't, as a good team, but hasn't looked great. I think if they could take advantage, get some interceptions early on, maybe jump out to an early lead, quiet the Cincinnati crowd, I think this is a good opportunity for Houston really to make a big statement. I know Oklahoma was the big statement, but this is another statement as they move forward, inching towards that possible playoff spot.
Number 12, Michigan State visits number 18, Notre Dame on Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. kick on NBC. The Irish have determined, they've settled on a starting quarterback, Deshaun Kaiser leading the Irish. This one has all the makings of a classic rivalry game, Michigan State and Notre Dame. Notre Dame bounced back like they're supposed to last weekend, but they need this one. And Michigan State is obviously one of the tougher teams that are going to be on their schedule. I'm taking Notre Dame, just so I can get that out there. But this is a test. We saw what happened against Texas when they were messing with the two quarterbacks. They now have a quarterback. They seem more in rhythm on offense. And now they get the home game against Michigan State. Place is going to be crazy. It's going to be a fun one, but I'm going to take Notre Dame in this one, in the tight one.
Yeah, and this is a critical game for Notre Dame. Once you already have that loss, especially for a team that doesn't have a conference affiliation, a team that doesn't have a championship game to go to at the end of the year, you can't afford a second loss. I mean, I think there's a possibility someday we'll see a two-loss team, get into that college football playoff spot, maybe even and win a championship. But I think for a team like Notre Dame, they can't suffer they couldn't suffer a second loss. So this is an important game for them. They got to continue to move forward. You talked about Deshaun Kaiser. I think he's done a great job. Seems to really kind of got the offense back in sync. I know they struggled a little bit early on against Nevada. I think this is a Michigan State team that was coming off a bye week, didn't look good in their opener against Furman. So they're going to have, this is a game opportunity where, Notre Dame's had their big game against Texas. They know what the big game environment's going to be like. I think they win this game, but I think it's going to be close. All these games seem to be close at some point or another.
But so far we have agreed on all of them except for the UCF game. So
put that down for your...
It's marked. We're not going to lose track of anything here. USC visits number 7, Stanford. This is the primetime game on ABC on Saturday, 8 p.m. kickoff. The third meeting in the last 12 months between these two schools. You'll remember what happened the last time they met. It's the Pac-12 title game. Christian McCaffrey, 461 all-purpose yards. They won 41-22. If that game was 2 weeks earlier, he probably wins the Heisman. He was that dominating in that game. I have Stanford as one of my teams in the playoff preseason. I'm not giving up on Stanford at this point. And USC, of course, coming off a humiliating opening week loss against Alabama. They did bounce back with a win they were supposed to have. But on the road to Stanford, I'm going with the tree. I'm taking the Cardinal in this one, Stanford with the win. And another big game for McCaffrey.
Yeah, I mean, I got to go Stanford in this one as well because, again, Christian McCaffrey seems to be the guy. You saw the, USC schedule, one of the toughest schedules in college football right now. Imagine you open up with Kansas State, you get that kind of second week against Utah State. Now you got to face Stanford, which had a week of rest. Christian McCaffrey, obviously last time out, over 461 all-purpose yards, as you mentioned. I mean, he's the guy really that drives this offense. To have this game at Stanford, I think USC is a good team, and I think they'll finally get themselves righted as a program in the next year or so. I don't think this is the year for that to happen. I like Stanford. And I think Stanford, as you mentioned, is going to be right there when it comes to the Pac-12 championship.
SEC kicks off at 3:30 with another huge game. Number 1, Alabama visits number 19, Ole Miss. Ole Miss looking to become the first school to defeat a Nick Saban coach Alabama team 3 times in a row. And just the fact that we're talking about Ole Miss beating Alabama 3 times in a row. In all of their meetings, Ole Miss has only won 10 times. They get credit for an 11th because Alabama had to forfeit one of their games a ways back. Before Ole Miss won 2 years ago, Alabama had won 10 straight in the series. You look at the meetings, it's a whole lot of Alabama. Alabama's going to be thinking about it. Of course, we said that last year. We said they were going to be thinking about that Ole Miss game and putting extra emphasis on it. But they're going on the road, going into Oxford, a chance to right a wrong. Ole Miss a chance to bounce back after getting an easy win from their opening week loss against Florida State, where for the first half looked like a team that could beat Alabama. I had trouble with this one. I'm going to take Alabama because Alabama just looks they look better than everybody in college football by a couple steps right now. It's only 2 weeks in. But don't be surprised if Chad Kelly comes out, plays like he did here in Orlando, that crowd gets going if Ole Miss doesn't have a third rabbit in their hat.
How could this even be close? Alabama's going to win this game by a lot.
Oh, stop it.
I mean, come
Stop
on.
it.
I mean, you look at the fact that, yes, Chad Kelly had stupendous last couple seasons, last season especially, obviously the only one, where they have to beat Alabama. But, come on. I mean, their secondary is so banged up. Ole Miss's secondary is so banged up. They lost a couple key guys early on, especially in that game against Florida State. You look at what Jalen Hurts, the freshman quarterback, has done for Alabama. He's really helped, elevate that offense to a different level. I think he'll take advantage of that weakened secondary, try to get the ball down the field. Calvin Ridley, obviously another guy, tremendous wide receiver for them as well. I think the tongue lashing that Lane Kiffin got from Nick Saban, I think will fire him up to try different things on that offense. I think they aren't going to let this happen. I think they win this game. I think they win this game convincingly.
So if it's a close game, can I take credit for
No.
calling it close? All right,
It's close, but horseshoes and hand grenades. Isn't that what they say?
Took Alabama in that one. All right, last game we're going to talk about. Number 3, Ohio State visits number 14, Oklahoma. 7:30 kickoff on the Fox Network. Ohio State running out the basketball arena in Oklahoma for a pep rally. Only 8, and they're making it sound like they have 20,000 people. There were 800 people for the Ohio State alumni running out the basketball arena for a pep rally before this game. Ohio State looked great against Bowling Green, looked strong against Tulsa. The defense made a difference. The offense took a half to get going. Oklahoma bounces back from their loss to Houston. They've got a lot. They still are in. Oklahoma, I think, was dropped unceremoniously really far in the rankings after that loss to Houston. They've got a lot to prove. Ohio State maybe a little bit too high at this point, and I'm going to ruin my chances of getting anything good at any family dinner coming up in the holidays. But I have Oklahoma to win this game. I thought Oklahoma was better than Ohio State before the season.
Never thought I'd see the day where you would root against.
I'm not rooting against anybody. I'm
Ohio
making
State.
a pick. The Sooners, Baker Mayfield, talented at home. The national TV audience, it's a night game. This is going to be a good game. I'm not saying that Oklahoma is going to blow them out, but I think Oklahoma has so much on the line. And the Big 12 has a lot on the line with Oklahoma, that this is their chance to get back into that national discussion, to have a shot. Ohio State's still very young. This will be their first test for a lot of those guys on the road, hostile crowd. I'm taking Oklahoma. It's going to be a tight one, and if anybody wants to have me over for holiday dinners, I probably will be free, but I'm taking the Sooners.
Brant's family, I just want to let you know I'm available for dinner because I'm picking Ohio State to win this game. That's right. I think the reason that the Buckeyes win this game is basically Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer is undefeated as the head coach of Ohio State on the road. I think that's going to be a key fact that kind of gets overlooked. But I think JT Barrett has done an amazing job so far. He knows how to win games. I think he's helped out that offense. But more than the offense itself, I've been impressed with their defense, as we talked about. They're able to take advantage of mistakes and miscues that the first couple teams in Bowling Green and Tulsa knew. So they're going to try to take care of those miscues. And let's be honest, Urban Meyer's protege, Tom Herman at Houston, called him up this week and said, Urban, let me tell you how you beat Oklahoma. So that is why I'm picking Ohio State to beat Oklahoma. In a close one, though. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Ohio State wins. I'm ready for that turkey dinner, Parson family.
Yep.
So
you'll take my spot. I'll be at the kids' table. It's a big kids' table. We did have one Twitter question we want to get to before we finish up, and it's somewhat related to this one. It's from Twitter account Master Billy Q. William Deeney asked, who will have the bigger chip on their shoulder this week, Oklahoma or Oklahoma State? We've touched a little bit upon Oklahoma in this game and their loss to Houston, dropping so far in the top 25. They come in this game at number 14 after starting the year in the top 4. Oklahoma State, we talked about it on our podcast, didn't talk so much about it here. Of course, Central Michigan beats them on a crazy final play that, if it should have happened, would be one of those, it'd be a Stanford Cal kind of play, but instead it's the play that shouldn't have happened. Central Michigan beating Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State gets Pittsburgh this weekend, a good Pitt team coming off a win over Penn State, a team that can run the ball a variety of ways. I would say Oklahoma State probably has more of a chip on their shoulder because this is business for Oklahoma. They lost to Houston, but this is business as normal. Oklahoma State, to me, probably has the chip on their shoulder because they were robbed last weekend. No other way to put it. robbed by a terrible officiating call to give Central Michigan that play.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think Oklahoma State has the bigger chip on their shoulder this week. I think because the fact that you should have won that game, you in your heart knew you won that game essentially, and because of a a blown call by 10 officials who were at the game, you don't get that win. And then granted, life's not fair, but I think coming into this week, those players will be so ready to go and so ready to beat their opponent because they also know that loss really hurt them. That hurt them in any chance Oklahoma State had of being in a possible playoff scenario, for the Big 12 because, again, you lose to Central Michigan. I don't care how bad the call was. When you're the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, it's considered a loss. So you're going to look at the loss and you're going to say, listen, a loss is a loss. Even though it may have had this issue, they're not going to put you in the playoff unless you go undefeated the rest of the way. So I think they come with a big chip on their shoulder. I think they're going to try to win this game. I agree with you. Oklahoma, this is business. They're used to these kind of games. They know they've got a big game. Now, granted, having said that, they've got to win this game as well because a 2-loss Oklahoma team, I think, doesn't get into the college football playoff. And they know if they lose this game, they're probably going to have someone else will step up.
But that's not a chip on their shoulder.
That's
a weight on their shoulder. That's a weight on their back.
But the chip is on Oklahoma State's shoulder.
For Matt Michelle, I'm Brant Parsons. Thanks for watching. We do this every Wednesday at 3:30. You can ask us questions all week long, and we'll answer them on the show. And then next week, we'll make our picks, and who knows? We may know where the ACC title game is, and we may know who's smarter, me or this guy.
Yeah.
We're still trying to figure it out. Or who's the better dressed. You can vote at OrlandoSentinel.com. Just kidding. No votes. We will be back again next Wednesday at 3:30. We are out of here.